Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, I have a pitch for you. An idea for a way that we can branch out in our multimedia productions.
This is great, but I think you're supposed to be emailing these to ourselves.
Nope, live on the air.
At like 3 a.m.
I'll email it to you like while you're taking like a quick 30-second break to like formulate your thoughts at some point throughout this podcast. I'll email you the thought. I'll type it up and send it to you.
All right, sounds good.
Here's the pitch. You and we saw the Taylor Swift The Eras Tour movie.
Film.
Is it called Point of order. Is it called Taylor Swift The Eras Tour and that's it? Or is it called Taylor Swift The Eras Tour the movie? Because that feels like parody.
It would not make sense for it to just be called the Eras Tour, right?
Yeah, but like I think it is called that.
Okay, all right. No, you're right about this. So the concert, the tour itself is called the Eras Tour,
right?
And then the movie, the film is called Taylor Swift.
Thank you for specifying.
I
think we can safely call this one a movie. I don't think we need to call it a film.
It
wasn't. There's no film involved.
Movie might even be pushing it.
2 hour and 45-minute YouTube video. It's like a Vivo.
It was fun, but it wasn't a narrative arc.
Not the point. You're distracting from my pitch.
Okay.
Here's my pitch. So this is already, much has been written about how this has taken over the movie industry. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of tickets either have been sold or are in the process of being sold or will be sold eventually. Taylor Swift famously went over the studio's heads and negotiated directly with the theater chain AMC to distribute this film, which is kind of a power move.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like one of the only people walking the face of the earth who has the power to do something like that.
Yeah.
My pitch, and you'll remember that I've been pushing for more baseball-related pop cultural content for a while now. My pitch is that we shoot the World Series like this, and then we make a World Series film, and we put it in theaters. And you go and you get to watch baseball in a cinematic experience. No more of this, like, Fox put this 1080p cam and it, like, circles the players for, like, 2 seconds per game. And no more of this, like, nonsense StatCast visualization on the screen where it's just like, here's the play that you just watched, but acted out in 2D by cartoon characters. I want it to be shot, directed, edited like a professional documentary. And I want it to be distributed in theaters far and wide. What do you think?
And all the players are like Toy Story characters, or I guess I'm a little confused.
They're all AI. Yes.
Okay, they're all AI.
Yeah, they're all AI.
Yeah. I'm into it.
Why don't we do stuff like this for sports? Why don't sports documentaries have cultural moments?
I mean, what is the market for like watching live sports games like a few months after they occur?
I don't mean, okay, so good question. We're honing the pitch right now.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't need to be like the full gameplay.
Okay.
Like Taylor Swift The Eras Tour.
Right.
The movie. Because that was just straight up the concert. Like I was sort of hoping for a little bit of like a cheeky little behind the scenes shot or two.
Right.
Not in there. Spoiler, not in there. This can be some more behind the scenes footage too, that we can incorporate it in to make it like a real documentary. But I also do want gameplay on the screen too, because I want to hear, really just what I want is the opportunity to hear that Dolby mix from the...
Any excuse you can find.
Well, you saw the Phillies home run, the first Bryce Harper home run in Game 3, where ESPN was also airing I think they called it like a Dolby mix of the broadcast with no announcers, and it was just the crowd. Like, imagine you hear that in the Dolby Theater at AMC, no sponsorship.
I just have to say, I love the idea of rolling out all of this like really high quality, like this is the Dolby mix,
Yeah.
And so when you're streaming it on your phone, coming through your iPhone's speakers
on Twitter, where it just like down samples everything too.
Exactly. You're really getting the full experience.
It was still cool though. Now imagine if you were getting the full experience.
Right, exactly.
And you could hear Hoagie Mouth John standing on the roof of Citizens Bank Park while Bryce hits that home run. Your thoughts on the two guys standing on the roof? How did they get up there?
I don't even want to question it. It's kind of one of those things that I have to assume that they have always been there.
They live there.
That they, it was just such a perfect encapsulation of what's going on in Philadelphia right now.
What's going on in
what's
Philadelphia?
going on?
Concerning. Looking into it.
Right.
What's going on in Philadelphia right now? Very concerning. So you hate my pitch. You don't think it'll work? You don't think the movies?
No,
movie
I actually
theaters will
think
be into it?
you have sold. So again, initially, given that you were comparing it to Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour,
the movie,
right, which is not a part of the title. It's just a clarifying point.
We're just being good journalists.
Mm-hmm. I had thought that it was just going to be a 3-hour baseball game, but you're right that
I'm open to that also.
I mean, I'd watch it
live. Open up movie theaters to live sports. Now we're just solving all the problems.
Now we are really solving all the problems.
I don't want to watch a baseball game at a bar where the sound isn't even on. Okay, I did do that for Game 4, and I had a great time. I played some trivia. I was with a friend of the show, and the Phillies won, and we came in 5th in trivia out of 17 teams, which I considered to be pretty good.
That's a win.
That is a win. However, imagine if I was doing that in a Dolby theater at AMC. Crack of the bat so loud that your ears will be ringing for days. It's enticing.
It is enticing. I mean, they could produce one for every round of the playoffs, given how much time's between the series, right?
Yeah, more on that later.
More on that.
I have some serious thoughts about that. All I'm saying is call us up. We got ideas. We got thoughts. We could produce it. We could ideate. We could consult.
Right. I feel like we're more analysts in this regard.
I have a lot of technical skills that I can bring to the table when it comes to how stuff should sound. Not so much how stuff should look. You should focus on that. We can Photoshop your NYU degree to say that you graduated from Tisch in the visual arts or something, or in filmmaking.
Yeah.
That won't be hard. You're pretty good at Photoshop.
I am. Yeah. I mean, I could just tell people I went to Gallatin. And that'll kind of be it. They'll be like, never mind. I don't really want to know.
I majored in live broadcasting experience for theater.
Right.
They'll be like, oh my God, that's perfect.
Right. Experiential film.
Do you think that people listening know what Gallatin is?
I think
it was a TikTok thing a couple years ago.
Was it?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I know it's a bit in our circles.
What circles are those? Liberal elites who have never been to the ballparks of middle America yet judge them anyway.
Yeah, millennials with tens of thousands of student debt.
Hey man, too soon. Don't be saying student debt on this podcast. That those payments resumed this month. The look of pain and anguish just stretching across your face. Okay, should we talk about the Major League Baseball playoffs? What do you think?
I think we should.
All right, should we talk about journalistic ethics as well? Should we talk about scheduling? We're going to talk about all of those things, of course. Before we do, I am Bobby Wagner.
I'm Alex Baisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Do you want to make a podcast? Spotify has got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And Alex, I'm going to need you to tell me how it works.
I would be delighted, Bobby. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Very important. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take conversations with your fans, that's the listeners, that's you listening to this ad right now, to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch.
We have been using Spotify for Podcasters for years, and it is the easiest way for us to get our podcasts out to you. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Okay, thank you to this week's new patrons, Austin, Chris, and Max. Speaking of patrons, thank you to everybody who came out to our Patreon watch along of Game 2 of the Philadelphia Phillies versus the Atlanta Braves. In retrospect, a hilarious game. Just a hilarious game. The only game the Braves won in truly absurd fashion. We were all just sitting there watching it along together.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were we like momentarily bad luck for the Phillies? Were we momentarily the only thing that could step in front of the Philadelphia Phillies vibe train?
It does appear that way. I mean, we were just sitting here discussing what games we should watch the rest of this postseason. And now I am a little reticent to watch any Phillies because the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, famously last year we did a watch along during the game that they got no hit by Christian Javier.
Right. So like things are not looking very great for us right now.
Well, we didn't. It's not like we were doing a watch along of the other 3 games that they lost to the Houston Astros. I mean, it is possible, maybe, just maybe. Let me posit the idea that the Phillies are not the greatest baseball team ever, and we're not the thing that jinxed them. I would like to posit that theory. However, I have been told by multiple people close to me in my life, if we come for the Phillies again and we jinx them again, then I'm in trouble. So I just want you to factor that in. So we're weighing when we're going to do our next watch along for those people who were there, who were present, who were able to make it out. We mentioned at the end of it that we intended to do at least one watch along per round of the MLB playoffs. The schedule is very tricky this week. I don't know if most of you have seen this. Schedule kind of weird.
I've heard some rumblings.
We were trying to do Rangers Astros so that we could, mix up the side of the bracket, mix up the teams that are involved. And hopefully if we have like Rangers fans or, very select few Astros fans in the Tipping Pitches community, we could watch along with one of those games. But the schedule is tougher for them this week. So we're weighing a couple different options. We will follow up in the Patreon Messenger as a Patreon post in the Slack, all of the relevant places. And we will let you know as soon as we know. Thank you for your patience on that front. And thank you for participating in last week's. It was a lot of fun. It's a different way to watch a ball game.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you that much. Better or worse than the hypothetical watching it in the Dolby Theater at AMC? What do you think?
I think it's just different. I think you'd probably sitting in a Dolby Theater to be forced to kind of pay attention to what's going on. Very easy to sort of tune out, I will say, and just get caught up in the conversation.
Yeah. What was the highlight? What was the highlight tangent for you this past time? Famously, in the past, we've had some chats about milk.
That really is the one that stands out. Do
you know why it stands out? Because everybody got to see your weird thing about milk. Your weird milk thing. I don't even
have a weird milk.
You have a weird milk thing.
I did at one point in my life drink milk at strange moments.
Confess.
Sorry, my bones are strong.
Are they? Are your bones strong? I've known you since you've broken a bone. How strong could they possibly be? I've never broken a bone since you've known me. I don't know if that's true. Almost certainly not.
I think even if you had, we probably wouldn't. You'd just be like, well, my back's hurting an extra amount today.
Wow. Okay. Putting me on blast. Yeah. Alex used to drink milk with burritos. Just to be like, I'm eating a burrito, and I feel like having milk. And that came up on a previous live stream.
I appreciate you reviving this a year after it first came to light.
So this time around, I think one of the highlights was that we talked a lot about moldy jam. So if that sounds like a good way to spend game TBD for series TBD, come join. It really was a lot of fun. People joined from all over. And we were so thankful that everybody helped us with the fact that we're completely incapable of technically executing one of these events. So thanks to everybody for that. Okay. Final reminder on that front. You can sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/tippingpitches. These live streams are patron only. It's one of the perks of being part of the Patreon community. And thank you to everybody who is involved in that and who has been signing up. It's very much appreciated. Okay. Would you like to talk about the last week, since we have released an episode of the Tipping Pitches podcast about the Major League Baseball playoffs? A lot happened.
Some things have happened.
Where should we start? Should we just start with the Braves Phillies and
I feel like we should just
all
get
the
that out of the
talking
way.
points out of the way?
Yeah, it feels like the biggest sort of behemoth.
So you told me before we started recording that you wanted to start with your full-throated defense in support of Alana Rizzo. So I just want to kind of clear out and let you do that.
No, can I say though that I really do
think she made some good points.
I really admire
her ability to stand up against the crowds.
Damn it. The creativity with which Braves fans approached this playoff series. It felt like every game they were kind of they were throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what narrative was going to stick, right? So like the first one that we got.
No. It's too many. They needed to pick one.
Oh, well, I agree.
It's like a movie that you watch and you're like, the plot was just all over the place. It felt like it was hacked to bits.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just didn't know where to focus my attention, frankly. At first we got the layoffs, right? The layoffs narrative was kind of the one that overshadowed everything. The
rest versus rust thing.
Right, exactly. So
the way that you said it, the layoffs, it made it sound like the Braves laid off multiple employees right before the series. And I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, I don't think we would have heard about that. Right. The Braves, famously, since they're a good baseball team, got a bye. Right. They didn't have to play in the wild card round.
Correct.
Which some people view, I think, as a benefit because you don't risk getting eliminated in a 3-game series right off the bat after winning your division by 16 games or whatever.
14.
Sorry. Slander.
It's okay. I'm just trying to be factual. We're committed to journalistic ethics on this podcast. We are not jack-off bloggers or podcasters.
Well,
nope, we're not.
I don't know. What do you think? Disadvantage, Bobby, to
clearly not
to have days off prior to playing in a playoff series?
I'm going to say something that's going to sound honestly surprisingly centrist for me.
Okay.
I think it actually is a disadvantage for your hitters to have more days off than they are accustomed to. I think that is okay to say. Because the Braves, I think, are a perfect example of a team that is genuinely great, but has good starting pitching and a great lineup. That is the type of team that can flame out in the playoffs and look much worse than they should because they just go cold. This is what has happened to the Dodgers multiple times over the last half decade. I would say to Braves fans, you have about 3 more of these before you can legitimately complain, like the Dodgers fans can. I think it is okay to suggest that there is some level of rust for hitters after not seeing live pitching from opponents for over a week. That's not something that happens throughout the rest of the baseball calendar. You get 4 or 5 days off during the All-Star break. And then if you get a bye, you get 4 or 5 days off for the playoffs. I would just like to say, it's always been this way. It's always been this way. You've always had more time to get your rotation set, to get rested, to get players healthy. And if you think that you're the type of player that is going to be rusty from taking those few days off, tough shit. Take a live BP against someone else on the 40-man then. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what... It's always been this way. That slight disadvantage that you might have from that through the first 1 or 2 games. I'll give you 2 games even. 2 games because the players that they were saying were rusty on the Braves, it's was Austin Riley rusty? Because after he looked pretty bad in game 1, then he hit a really important home run in game 2 and another really important home run in game 4. So where's the rust narrative for him? Was it
or the entire Houston Astros team? But that's a separate issue.
It's a different thing. They've made a dark and depressing deal with the devil, that team. That just nothing ever goes wrong for them. I don't understand it. I think that whatever slight disadvantage that you can get from being a little bit rusty, trying to put as many qualifiers in here as possible, is clearly, demonstrably worth it to not have to potentially be eliminated in a 3-game wildcard series.
Yeah. Which far more random than a 5 or 7 game series.
Why don't you ask the Milwaukee Brewers if they would have liked to be rusty? Oh, wait, you can't because they're not in the playoffs anymore because they lost in the wild card round. Ask them if they would have rather had the bye. Ask the Tampa Bay Rays if they would have rather had the bye and been rusty. It's it's such a non-story and it's been made into such a story Because if it was just fans who were whining about their teams, like you're saying the Braves fans were saying that this was part of the reason that they did not look as good this year and last year against the Phillies. If it was just fans, you could chalk it up to, like sour grapes. I'm bummed that my team got eliminated. I think that this did not cater to my team enough. This is a thing that we see all of the time in sports. But it's not just fans. It's media members. It's broadcasters. It's the entire baseball industrial complex insinuating that this, for some reason, is not fair. And I don't understand it because these two things are sort of folded into each other. The rest and the playoff format question. Are we benefiting the top seeds enough?
I will give credit to some Atlanta players as well as other players around the league who and managers as well who rightfully pushed back on this sentiment and said, like that's just kind of an excuse and we need to come out and play better. I know Spencer Strider was among the players who came out and said, yeah, we can't really use the rest days excuse. Like the Phillies came out and played good baseball and played better played better than us over the course of the series. It's also just, it kind of boils down to what you think the point of the playoffs are. Like, is the point of the playoffs to simply justify and reinforce the results of the regular season? Because if that's the case, why do you have the playoffs? Just rank the teams by record at the end of the year, and then the best team wins the World Series. Like the point of the playoffs is to invite a level of randomness, honestly, that says we took the best players, the best teams from this year and matched them up against each other and saw how they did. And some had buys and layoffs, and some had to play more games and were at greater risk of being eliminated. And then at the end, we found out who fared the best in October. Like I push back against the idea that the best regular season team should necessarily then be afforded like the easiest slate in the playoffs, or like should be handed the World Series then?
Yeah, like by divine right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think fans have a hard time watching 162 games just to see their season end in 3 days.
Yeah.
Or in 2 days. Or in the old format, 1 day. I'm just kind of wondering a little bit why all of a sudden the new format is the reason that we think it's unfair. We have 2 years worth of sample size. And honestly, we haven't even gotten different teams that have been great and been eliminated. Like, it's been the Braves and the Dodgers both times that have been driving this conversation. And I feel like the Orioles kind of got left out of this too, because they're a young team and this was their first go around in October. And so people were just like, well, maybe they're not used to it, or maybe they're not ready for the big stage, or they ran into a buzzsaw in the Rangers, or whatever it is. But like, it is a very complicated can of worms to open up as to why teams that seem historically good, that are winning over 100 games, that are setting records, that look like heavyweight favorites heading into a series in comparison to the team that they're going against, why they keep losing in the playoffs, where in the past, it didn't seem quite like there were as many upsets like this. It seemed like the heavyweight teams actually performed like heavyweights. Part of that is nostalgia. Part of that is looking back and seeing, okay, the core four Yankees, they kept winning and they won all these games during the regular season. I don't know, like, yeah, also the 116-win Mariners got eliminated before the World Series too. The greatest team of all time, if we're just going to talk about regular season record. I think that the state of the league is that 10 to 15 teams don't want to compete, and they want to trade all of their best players to the teams that do want to compete so that they can lower their payrolls. Many of those 100-win teams get a portion of their 100 wins by beating up on teams that are worse than ever. And so whereas a team that won 104 games this year, like the Atlanta Braves, might have won 95 games 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. If the Braves were 95 and if the Braves were 95 and 67, that's 162. Took me a second there. and the Phillies were 7 games behind that, would people be freaking out as much? I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so. Because the Brewers won 93 games or whatever, or 95 games this year, whatever they actually finished their season with. And people were not lumping them into the reason that the playoff format is broken, because they lost to a Diamondbacks team. I just think there are more complicated factors.
No, I think part of the enjoyment of the baseball playoffs is that it's far more chaotic and unpredictable than the playoffs of the other major sports leagues in the US.
Yeah, like just watch basketball if you want the best team to win all the time.
Right, exactly. And like this is what we tune in for. So I don't know. I don't necessarily understand the sentiment of wanting to blow up the format because your team lost, but I guess
I just have to say, we didn't want this format. Like a majority of fans did not want the expansion of the playoffs.
Right.
And I think whatever has come from it has to do with that fact.
I guess, but I also don't like these don't necessarily feel like principled arguments again. Like I don't think if the Braves had won this series, they'd say, well, we probably, we shouldn't have received that layoff ahead of time. Even though we won, it's still the principle of it is unfair for other teams who may be in this similar situation, So I don't know. I like, yes. Did we want the expanded playoffs? Like, no, maybe not. But like, it honestly has not affected my viewing experience, generally speaking, beyond the just strange off days between series and that sort of thing. Like that is the most jarring part of it, is that there's been 2 days since there's been playoff baseball.
Well, I mean, that was the last piece of this that I wanted to talk about. We got a question from Ken Rosenthal on Twitter. Absolute best Twitter name out there. Sorry, Twitter, X, formerly Twitter. About the built-in days off, the scheduling of the playoffs. I think it's a genuine question how much of this frustration has to do with the format at all versus the scheduling, where these like random built-in days off so that we can get a slightly higher percentage of games in prime time. But also it's like that's also not really working though, because then the ALCS game 1 is starting in competition with the NFL Sunday, which like it's not going to do well on that front. So I don't know. I'm kind of confused about that as well. But like they feel like they need to build in a day off in between each round. But then every round has ended early because no series has gone the distance.
Right.
So we kind of have like a perfect storm right now of less than stellar scheduling. Like, it's my opinion that if you have to play a 7-game series, then maybe you might just have to play the next day. Like, that means that you didn't eliminate a team as early on and earn the rest, which we just talked about as maybe a downside, which it's kind of nonsense. But having these like 2 awkward days built in between each round, it doesn't do us any favors in terms of preventing people from like doing these discourse cycles about whether that past series was fair or not. And also, like, even beyond just the scheduling question, I don't think the series have been very good. So, like I said, it's sort of a perfect storm of like all of these things are going wrong at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting because I do think the Atlanta-Philadelphia series was probably the most compelling, in part because of the drama around it all and Braves fans continuing to just like step on rakes, right? Like the Galaxy brain take of doing the chop is actually respectful, and doing the chop to mock us is actually disrespectful because it's making fun of something that is actually playing homage to Native American culture. That, I mean, one of the more creatively inspired takes on racism I think I've ever seen.
In a long litany of extremely creatively inspired roundabout logic.
Right.
Comes
yeah.
to,
I mean,
like,
coming
doing
from
racism.
Cobb County alone. Like,
yeah, that's true. Can I add a quick caveat to that?
Yeah.
Because the behavior of Braves fans, and we're going to get into this a little bit more when we talk about journalistic ethics.
Mm-hmm.
The behavior of Braves fans has been downright despicable this postseason and really over the last few years. On Twitter, it has become a very toxic place to be up against Braves fandom. And I thought our friend Bradford William Davis had a really insightful and thoughtful take on groups of fans and generalizing about groups of fans and assuming that they all act the same way. He was like, he basically said something to the effect of, no one fan base is going to win the racism wars or something like that. No one fan base is going to out racism the other fan base. That like a fan base is a collective of like millions of people in most cases. And those people are all varying degrees of bad, but every fan base has racist people in it. And we should not act like one fan base is morally superior to the other necessarily. I think that is true. I also think that Atlanta as an organization is intentionally signal boosting some of the more nefarious aspects of their fan base. And the chop, which you mentioned, and the, opinion piece defending the chop, that is one piece of it. The moving the ballpark into the zip code with the wealthiest and whitest suburban flight development from the city of Atlanta, where it used to actually be located, is part of it. Clearly, like, there is some organizational toxicity happening with that fan base. They have made like half-hearted efforts over the years to distance themselves from some of those more nefarious and toxic elements. And then they've kind of reneged on them when they realized that it continued to make them money hand over fist. With the whole like battery, with the whole like creating the Braves fan experience. And I earnestly feel bad for Braves fans who do not want to partake in any of that stuff, because it has become so hard to be a Braves fan and to avoid things like the chop, to avoid things like the toxic Braves Twitter experience. And that is true of every fan base, but not every fan base's organization is as complicit in some of these things as Atlanta's is. And I think that's honestly why I have such a visceral dislike of them, and why a lot of fan bases across the league have a visceral dislike of them, in addition to the fact that they've been very good. And so it helps your villain status when your team is also winning at the same time, and everybody else has to be exposed to some of these things in a brighter, more intensely focused light.
Yeah, well, they're already starting 2 or 3 steps ahead from every other team, right? I mean, especially following the Guardians changing their name, like they're kind of the outlier in terms of organizations who are culturally rooted in like racist tropes and have refused to make that necessary change to their image, because they realize that there is a culture around it that fans enjoy and engage in, and it's why people show up to the park, right? So why would you get rid of that if fans have linked their identity to this team's, even if it is a little unsavory, right? Because there's money to be made with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say on our mea culpa for the Braves?
No. I mean, from a general perspective, no. I mean, I think that I don't know, to pivot it back to the series itself a little bit, I think that this Phillies Braves series over the last 2 years have, at least for me, asked some interesting questions about what makes a good team, honestly. And like how much of that is, I know that we've had a sort of back and forth conversation about whether momentum is real in the baseball community. There's like kind of not really a sabermetric explanation for the idea of like momentum and, for lack of a better term, vibes. I think that these two teams and these two series over the last 2 years have maybe been the best test case in my life that I can remember for a team that is demonstrably better than another team losing because the worst team just likes playing baseball more than the good team. Like they just like playing baseball with each other more than the Braves like playing baseball with each other. And I actually don't even think the Braves have like bad chemistry or whatever. Like, I think the Padres have bad chemistry, but I think the Braves have fine chemistry. I just think that the Phillies, call it what you want, call it momentum, call it vibes, call it confidence, call it whatever. There's clearly something that is allowing those players to play to the top of their potential. And there's something that is not allowing the Braves players to play to the top of their potential. I don't know what it is. It feels honestly cosmic. And I can't explain it. But that is like, that's a win. I think that's a good thing for the sport. And I think that it's entertaining. And I just don't understand why it has to be bogged down in all of these conversations about rest and all these conversations about quotes coming out of the Braves locker room and all these conversations about Braves fandom and all of, it's like we've kind of lost the plot a little bit. We've lost the plot a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't know if you come up against the Vibes team in the playoffs as the historically dominant team and lose, then maybe you just weren't the better team. It actually might be as simple as that. And I hate to just be like the best team always wins in the playoffs guy, but like, maybe this is just like how shit goes every year, is that sometimes the good teams get bounced. And that sucks. And it's hard to see, but you don't have to come up with a dozen different narratives of like why this cannot and should not happen going forward, because it happens every year. There's no way of avoiding it. Sorry you drew the short end of the stick a couple of years in a row, but hey, maybe next year you won't even make it at all, and then we don't have to worry about it.
We got a funny question from Jason. Which A's player will the Braves trade for to try to get themselves over the hump against the Phillies next year? And I know that that's a funny framing of the question. Frankly, I don't think there are any players left on the A's that would get the Braves over the hump. I don't know. Is there a single player on the A's? This is maybe a bleak question and a tangent. Is there a single player on the A's that would have even played in this series for the Braves? Like, is there one positional advantage that the A's have?
No, I mean, maybe it depends on your belief in Zach Geloff, which is a pretty bleak place to be starting from.
What position does he play?
Second.
So you think he would have played over Ozzy
Albies? Mm-hmm.
Can he play short?
Right, get Arcia out of there. You would have solved a couple problems.
Okay, I guess this is the point of the podcast in which we have to talk about Orlando Arcia and our friend Jake Mintz. I want to hear what you have to say about this, because I feel like I've been voicing my opinion far and wide on social media. And so I haven't really heard there's not even like, I don't even want to say take.
Yeah.
Just kind of like your download of this entire situation. The most talked about, over discussed thing in sports for the last week.
I think more than anything else, I was really shocked at how many prominent folks in the baseball world came down on the side of, yeah, the locker room is a sacred space. And as a reporter, you have to respect that. Like we get weird stories coming out of the clubhouse, I think, after almost every game.
Mm-hmm.
Famously, there's a whole narrative right now about how the Texas Rangers fucking love Creed, because they just keep bumping it like before games. And it's hoping that, like, whatever.
Or how the Phillies play the Robin cover after every
exactly.
game.
It's like this
or like how Shohei Ohtani packed up his stuff and his locker was empty. Like, is that a sacred space? Are we allowed to talk about that? Like,
there has been a really, I think, interesting shift over the last.
Remember the dildo in Matt Harvey's locker?
Oh my God.
That was a sacred space.
Yeah, or like when Tom Brady leaves his "Make America Great Again" cap in the background, it's like,
and it's on TV.
Do we leave that alone?
Blur it out.
There has been a really interesting, I think, shift in the last few years of like how fans and even players, I think, sort of think of the dynamic between teams and media, and like what that responsibility is is it to report on things you see as newsworthy, of things you see happening in front of you, and as someone who covers a team, to, is it your duty to report on that, or is it to paint a nice picture of the team you're covering, because that's the role, is to act as someone who lifts this team up on a pedestal and gets their story out to the world. Like, this idea that reporters are there to report on the good things.
Yep.
It just doesn't track with me. That's not like reporters' job is to be in these spaces and talk about the things that they think are impacting the baseball that's being played in front of them. And boy, did this impact the baseball that was being played in front of them.
I think that I'm going to have honestly a really cynical, like longitudinal take on this whole situation.
Great. That's what I come to you for.
I think that's what everybody comes here for, honestly. I think that teams have been wanting and pushing for this exact thing for years.
Yeah.
Years, if not decades. I think that the way that teams have shrunken access, that they have truly cracked down on the free flow of information out of the team to the public for sometimes fair reasons. Some of those reasons I've found compelling over the years. Some of those reasons are players might not feel comfortable talking in front of the media after negative experiences in their lives. Sometimes on the field of play, but more often just like as human beings. And I find that a compelling reason to control the flow of media's access to a player in that specific moment. And you and I used to argue all of the time about Marshawn Lynch and Kevin Durant and their relationship to the media, where they feel like sometimes they can just have open conversations with them, and sometimes they can just be like, I'm never talking to you guys. This is bullshit. I don't want to talk to media. I don't want to do media. I'm like, well, then why do you play in a professional sports league that's broadcast by media? Some of those reasons are justified. I think more often than not, it's just because the team wants to monopolize the entire industry. The team does not want to look bad. The team does not want the truth coming out. They want their version of the truth coming out so that it keeps fans coming back, buying tickets, buying merchandise, liking the team. A generally positive view in a nakedly political sense. We want to keep our image clean. And now over the course of the last 10, 15 years, as you and I have been getting into this media world, access has been shrinking. COVID accelerated a lot of that. And then when people came back into the locker room, there was a question of what is still okay access, what is still our open availability. And that's not to say that these questions just came up for the first time recently. I mean, I've listened, when I was producing R2C2, I remember CC talking a lot about how weird some people were in the clubhouse and how that is a particularly fraught space because it is a place where players get changed. They do hang out in that space without reporters there. But I think that Atlanta looks at this, a team that is not quite as friendly to national media as they are to their local media, or as other teams are to national media. I think they look at this and they're like, this is another win for us. This is another way for us to restrict access. This is another way for us to point to the unfair characterization of our team and our players. And we have a persecution complex about this that is feeding into our larger persecution complex about media covering us and writing things that they don't like about us. I bet you the Braves didn't love it when all of the information came out that got their GM banned for life. I bet they didn't like a lot of the things that were written about that and the way that their organization is characterized and portrayed. But hey, those are the breaks of operating and making billions of dollars in a very public industry. You could go make your billions of dollars doing financial shorts of healthcare companies that are going to go under or something. I don't know. If you really only wanted to just make money, sorry, you're in a public space. All of that being said, I find this to be a really weird confrontation point because this was during open media availability and there were 15 other reporters in the locker room. So I don't understand.
It was reported by multiple people.
I don't understand why it became this conflagration point specifically. The only thing that I can contribute to it is that, again, I'm using this phrase perfect storm. It was because the Overton window of this conversation started in such an insane place, and that insane place was Braves fans saying that it never happened. The TikTok of this story after that became progressively slightly less deranged than pretending it never happened, but still not normal. Because it went from Braves fans saying, "This never happened, you're a liar, I'm going to kill you," to Jake, a person doing his job and completely fairly reporting something. I will keep saying that. To local Braves media implying that maybe it never happened. Not saying that it didn't happen. Not saying that Arcia didn't say "attaboy Harper." But, just kind of implying that it might not have happened. Saying that they didn't hear it. Saying that Arcia uses an interpreter, and so why would he be saying that English phrase, which is just absurd and kind of offensive presumption. And then from that point, it went to, well, okay, well, if we're not going to say that anymore, then we're going to say some slightly more sanitized version of that, which is, well, this was in the locker room. This is some sort of morally gray thing. Like, you don't need to report this. Why would you report this? And so because we had to take it all the way from this didn't happen, you're a liar, you're fake news, and like slowly it trickled back to normalcy to now where it's at the point where like reasonable people are having to like come out in defense of where this story started, and the BBWAA has to put out a statement defending Jake for the right to report this thing and saying that he's a credentialed member, which of course he is, not a jack-off blogger. Amazing phrase. That's going to be someone's fantasy baseball team that wins their league next year. The jack-off bloggers. That's the only way that I can, like, from a media literacy standpoint, see how the story became such a big thing. Because it started in such a deranged place. And because this series was also already so hotly contested and watched that people were just looking for anything.
Right. I mean, if the Braves win Game 3, I don't really think we're talking about this. If Bryce Harper doesn't have 2 monster home runs and give those epic stare downs,
sick that he did.
Oh, it was sick. Oh, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that it all unfolded like this, because why would you give Bryce Harper that sort of ammo? Like.
I also love the idea that like he wasn't going to do that if he didn't.
I know. But that's the thing is like it just felt like another strain of sort of coping and trying to create this narrative.
Get their asses.
Of like, hey, us against the world,
I hate
and it's
that.
just not. It's just not.
Yes, it's not them against the world. I don't know why every team feels the need to do that now. Some teams, okay, fine. Maybe most people didn't believe in you, and that's okay. Then you can do the nobody believed in us thing.
Yeah.
But to say that like it's the Braves against the world, the team that has utilized every baseball industry advantage to build a truly Death Star of a team that is laying waste to the NL East year over year, 6 straight NL East titles and multiple 100-win teams and a World Series, by the way. They did win the World Series. Like, it's pretty universally accepted that you guys are fine.
Yeah.
You guys are actually okay. It's actually kind of the Phillies versus the world. Like it's an uphill battle for them.
Yeah.
And they're not treating it like that, And that's why I think that it's so easy. So it was so much easier to root for the Phillies than it was for the Braves, because they're just like, no, we're here to play baseball. We love each other.
Yep.
It's weird. It's weird. And the Braves players buying into these narratives is, for lack of a better phrase, loser shit.
Yeah.
And I was.
This is what I said last week. Is I mean, I know I was not the first person to say that the Braves vibes are rancid, but like it just on every front, I think I was not prepared for how rancid it was going to be.
They're like paranoid.
Yeah,
they're like really truly paranoid that about what? Honestly, about what? What are you worried about? That like people are going to think you're fraudulent? Like, I don't understand. You're proving you're fraudulent by getting so bogged down in these things and losing. Like. I don't know what they're so worried about, honestly. All right, we need to move on.
I mean, do you want to compare it to the other NL fan base who just kind of went quietly this after getting bounced this October?
Yeah,
who literally requested that we not even mention
them.
their names on this podcast.
Look, I'm sorry. It'd be just because we're journalists here,
right?
Not jack off podcasters. It would be journalistic malpractice to not at least mention the fact that the Diamondbacks are going to the NLCS after eliminating the Dodgers. 2 straight years for the Dodgers, going down against their division rivals that they have dominated during the regular season and over the course of the last 12 regular seasons. It's tough scenes, admittedly. I think they just had a bad week. And I think that they can kind of just accept that they had a bad week. They got thoroughly outplayed. They rolled over. It was one of the least entertaining underdog victories I've ever seen. I've ever witnessed. And that's not to take away from the Diamondbacks, who I think are performing well and proving why they even made it into the playoffs to begin with. Even though they have a negative run differential, like I think in past years they probably wouldn't have made it in, and they've caught a little bit of luck and a little bit of magic, but they've taken that opportunity and they've spun it forward. They've taken every door that the Dodgers opened for them by playing poorly, and they've stormed through it. And they did the same thing in the series against the Brewers. And now they're running into the Phillies, which is like, we'll talk a little bit about this and briefly preview the championship series. But like, that's a tough matchup for them. But I think that they've already, in terms of a playoffs being a proof of concept, I think that they've checked that box.
Yeah, well, they're kind of playing with house money a little bit, right? Like they can confidently say, "Hey, we weren't supposed to be here, but we did bounce, the behemoth, the Goliath Dodgers." And so it's a little bit like the Phillies, I think, in that regard of they were kind of playing second fiddle to these powerhouses in their division, and each team knocked off their respective rivals, and now can sort of justifiably say, hey, not a lot of people expected us to be here. Maybe the D-backs slightly more so than the Phillies. And so I do think it does make for a sort of compelling matchup.
It makes for a compelling matchup narratively. I'm not sure the series will be very good.
I mean, it might be a little lopsided, but
it could. I mean, we could be wrong. I think that Rangers Diamondbacks World Series is just a hilarious proposition.
Really, really hilarious is a way to put it.
Let's quickly pivot over to the AL side, which I would say had less drama. The Rangers dispatched the Orioles, swept them. A couple of those games were not particularly close. Game 1 was. In games 2 and 3, the Rangers, I would use the word outclassed the Orioles. This was kind of what I was trying to get at when I was saying that, okay, 100-win team, what does that mean? Does that mean that you were just thoroughly better than every other team that you were competing against all year? Does that mean that you are, throughout the annals of baseball history, like 100 wins generally means that you're a legitimately great team? You can't fluke into that, right? And I don't think that the Orioles fluked into that. I want to be clear about that. I have to say, looking back on the whole season, like that is a very flawed team to have won 102 games or 103 games or whatever. Like, yes, did they earn the best record in the American League? Absolutely. Did they win a lot of close games? Yeah. Did they need to improve their team at the trade deadline? Probably. Did they do that? No. And so I think you can look at that series and you can say probably the Orioles still would have lost if they had one other pitcher on their roster that they had traded for at the deadline. But I just don't know that like the difference between 92 wins and 102 wins is what it used to be, because of the fact that maybe the 92 win team didn't have Corey Seager for 50 games. Or maybe the 102 win team just happened to be more healthy, and while they were healthy beating up on 58 win teams, the other team that they were playing against might have been sputtering for a number of reasons.
This is the series that shows how easy it is for me to be convinced by narratives. Like the fact that the Orioles are young and they're green and they haven't been here before. I'm like, this is where it's beneficial to have those veteran players who've been around these environments before. And like, I think that kind of thing gets overblown sometimes. I do think there's something to the idea of having a team with veteran players who can maybe handle the environment a little better, who maybe are not necessarily riding off the youth revolution taking the league by storm, but like are actually, just guys who know how to play ball. You know?
I guess, yeah.
Who just listen to Creed before the fucking baseball game. Like I'm sorry that I can't get by. We talked and I said, I was like, what is the band that the networks are gonna like revive?
Yeah.
Are we gonna get 30 Seconds to Mars? Are we gonna get some Coldplay? And I really,
does Coldplay need revival?
I mean, no. I mean, they're on another just atmosphere.
Did they break up? Are they done so?
I don't think so. Did they?
Maybe I'm just thinking of Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow. They're done. But Coldplay's still alive. Thank God. I think it's kind of an amazing bit by them, by the way.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially given Creed's sort of memification.
Yeah.
Amid the mid 2000s. It's like they were due for a revival, I think. You Creed guy?
What do you think?
More of a Relient K guy?
I actually like Relient K. Relient K is good.
Yeah, sure. I listened to like their Christmas album once when I was 13. I was like, okay. I didn't know Christmas songs could actually slap.
I think that the thing that I'm most fascinated with from the era of Alex before I knew you is just how much free time you had and the ways in which you filled that time.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I think I have a general idea of what you're doing most hours of the day.
Yeah.
But like 13-year-old you could have been doing literally any number of things. And so I'm like, what rabbit hole was he going down at the moment? And you're the kind of person who's not just going to like, you can't let go of a thing. So if you start listening to Relient K's Christmas album, or if you find out that Relient K has a Christmas album, you're not just going to not torrent it. Like you are going to go get it and you are going to listen to it. And then you are going to formulate an opinion on it.
Yeah.
Whereas like I'm the kind of person, if I found out Relient K had a Christmas album and I was like, oh, it's not on Spotify, I was just like, well, just move on with my day.
I guess I'm never hearing that ever.
And you're not like that.
No.
You're like, I'm going to find Cowboy Joe West's CD. I'm going to put it on Mediafire and share it only with the select people who need it, not illegally.
Yeah.
And that's what I admire about you. I just want to clarify that. I'm not a Creed guy. I will be playing Be My Escape in this episode though.
Okay.
By Relient K. Back to the Rangers.
Yeah, what were we talking about?
They're a great team. I find it funny how Nathan Eovaldi is the greatest pitcher in the history of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can have a million Edgertronic cameras. You can optimize pitching all you want. But you know what you can't do? You can't make Nasty Nate go out there and just pitch through pain for innings on innings on innings and just mow down some of the greatest hitters alive year over year in the playoffs. Explain that, nerds.
Mm-hmm.
Put some numbers behind that, dorks.
First time Astros and Rangers faced off in the postseason.
Ever?
According to my sources.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, they were in different leagues.
Right. And like I feel like they have never really had sustained periods of success, especially ones that overlap.
Yeah. I'd like to take a mea culpa real quick.
Okay.
Remember before the season, or in the offseason, when Jacob deGrom signed with the Rangers?
Uh-huh.
And he said that it was because he wanted to compete. And Mets fans were kind of like, well, you just left a 101-win team with the owner who spends the most money in baseball to go to a team that was under 500 and hasn't been very good for the last few years and doesn't have like the best farm system in baseball. So that's a weird thing. That's a weird reason to frame leaving. You could have just said you wanted to live in Texas and not New York, and that fits your personality better. Like, that's fine. We would have accepted that. I gotta say, I was wrong. The Rangers are good. They look like they're going to be good for a while. They look like they've built a solid team. And you know what? They've done it in a kind of non-traditional way.
Yep. You could argue a way that you and I
admire more.
Would admire, generally speaking.
I mean, I think that the Mets are building a team in a similar way. So, it's still is kind of a wash to what he said. But I was way more down on the Rangers than you were, and that a lot of other people were. And I was wrong. They're good. That team, that lineup in particular, is hard to argue with. And as you know, as a pitcher who's had very little run support throughout his career, I can see what Jacob deGrom saw in them. The Astros. Do you want to say something about the Astros? Rather, do you want to say something about the Twins? You know, the Astros, if we've talked plenty about the Astros, I think this is a classic case of, wow, that team on the other end is better than us.
Mm-hmm.
We might need a couple more years of building this specific core to be anywhere near what they're doing.
Yeah, tough scene for Sonny Gray to have one bad start all year long.
I know.
And it came at the worst possible time.
I feel like he is having a bizarro world career where he's just like, for those of us who are fans of him, who have been following him at each of his various stops, really starting in Oakland where he was your boy.
Yeah.
He's amazing. He's so good.
He's a really
He
fucking
has
good pitcher.
Such a good command. He's like also my kind of pitcher too, where he's like a nerd about it.
Right.
And he's like very self-defeating when he's not his best. I'm like, there's a man after my own heart. And he wants to throw different kinds of pitches. He wants to get guys out in different ways. I can admire like the overpowering, all right, I throw 103 and I have a 95 mile an hour slider. And that's just what I do. It's just you can't touch this at all. But Sonny is not like that. He has like 2 different kinds of fastballs. He has 3 different kinds of breaking balls. He throws a good changeup.
Like 5'10" with like guile, you know?
Exactly. And for those of us who have been watching Sonny at each stop of his career and developing this relationship with him because of that, and he's been so good in so many places, and then just in the most inopportune moments possible throughout his career, he has kind of sucked. And I mean, I'm talking about when he got traded to the Yankees, when there were a lot of new eyes on him, a lot of new fans, and he was not very good with the Yankees for that second half of the season, did not come back with them, went to the Reds, was awesome with the Reds.
Which makes me think it had more to do with the Yankees than it did Sonny Gray.
It absolutely had more to do with the Yankees. And he's basically like come out and talked about that. And the Yankees have kind of like, to some extent, like some players and former like people involved in that process have kind of admitted fault there too, in terms of what they were asking him to throw and like how they were asking him to change his pitch repertoire and whatnot. But like, then he goes to the Twins. He's still really good with them too. And then against the Astros in the series that most people are watching, he has 1 stinker. Like you said, the whole year he's been great. And he has 1 bad start. And that wasn't even necessarily the reason that they lost the series. I think it could have been the reason that they like evened up the series and had a chance to steal it, but it wasn't. And I think that's just a bummer. And I love Sonny. And I hope that people continue to show him the respect that he's earned.
I'm just really curious to see where the Twins sort of go from here. Like it's really hard for me to put my finger on just what their strategy is beyond like get a bunch of guys who strike a lot of dudes out, both starters and relievers, and then an offense that can like hold their own.
Yeah.
It feels like, and they have the benefit again of playing in the AL Central, so they frankly don't need to have a huge stated plan to get to the playoffs. Obviously, the bar is a little bit lower, but I would like to see them kind of figure out a way to actually build off of this momentum rather than doing what I think we've seen them do in previous years of success, which is we're just going to keep it steady as she goes, right? We're going to keep around the guys who we like, the Polancos and the Keplers, and then hope we can kind of fill the gaps in-house.
They need more guys. They just need more guys.
Yeah.
They don't need to replace anything about the core that they have in place, really. Like Royce Lewis, Correa, Edouard Julien, who had a great year, Ryan Jeffers, the catcher. Like, these players are a good foundation of a team, but like they just don't have quite like the lineup depth of the teams that they're coming up against. And it really showed when because they're and that's without even mentioning their pitching staff, which is really good. Like really like one of the best pitching. It was one of the best pitching staffs in the field. And I think was the reason that they even made it this far.
Yeah.
Which is like Sonny Gray, Pablo Lopez, and then like a bevy of dudes in the bullpen who are just like throwing absolute gas. I just think that like when it comes to a playoff series against a team that is much more complete and well-rounded and has a lineup of guys that are harder to get out than the Twins have, those gaps start to show a little bit more. And I mean, it'll be an open question as to whether they can develop some of those players or whether they're going to be able to go attract those players to come sign there. And I think that Correa is an interesting fulcrum in that conversation because by all accounts, he is like one of the most beloved teammates in the league right now. And the kind of player who has a like cachet to attract other players to come play with him or to attract players to like stick around and build for the long term in Minnesota. And so they are more interesting than we lucked into this playoffs picture because we're just the least bad team in the AL Central would have you believe.
Yeah, I mean, they have as you mentioned, a decent enough foundation of like fringe prospect guys, right? You mentioned Julian, guys like Alex Kirilloff and
Kirilloff too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean Nick Gordon and Jose Miranda as well. So like guys who, if things break right, could be everyday regulars, but it kind of doesn't work if that's most of your lineup is hoping that things break right with these guys. So it would be nice to see them take a Rangers-like approach where they fill in these holes with one or two big splashes, as they did with Correa, right?
Yeah, sort of extenuating circumstance there, but yeah.
Extenuating circumstance, yeah. And again, I am not confident that we'll see that sort of thing, because I think that they can look at their roster and look at the Central and say, well, we made it work this year. Let's run it back.
But I don't know. But like at the same time, though, it would be kind of nice to kind of like slam the door shut on that division before it even gets started.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like rather than, because that is the type of division where you can, other teams in it have proven time and time again that if you are good, they won't try. So if
you're competent,
right? So it'd be nice if you could just basically like guarantee your fan base a level of sustained success, rather than like the last couple of years, the Twins have been sort of wandering in the wilderness a little bit. Like they've been disappointing, and there was like a sell-off in there, and they were able to kind of bounce back from that relatively quickly. But okay, we've probably spent enough time on the teams that are eliminated. Honestly, we probably spent too much time on the teams that are eliminated. Why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we'll answer a few questions, and in the process, we'll preview the championship series a little bit.
Gotta get out of here. I'm stuck inside this rut that I fell into by mistake.
All right, Alex, we got a little bit of a buffer question here before we continue talking about the playoffs on the field. Let's talk about the playoffs in the movie theater. Wyatt asks, rank the remaining 4 teams in order of which are most likely to see the Eras Tour movie in theaters this week.
Great question.
Feels pretty clear.
I think number 1 is, that one's easy, right?
Yeah.
It's Phil's.
Yeah. The Braves. Oh, wait, no, they're not in it anymore. Yeah. The Phillies. They seem like they would have a great time. They also have kind of like a lot of young online feeling guys.
Yeah.
Where they seem like they have more of a knowledge of Taylor Swift than your average professional athlete would. Like, don't get me wrong. I think they have a lot of like Luke Bryan guys in the locker room as well. But for some reason, they have that sort of energy.
Yeah, I feel like they would be very happy leaning into sort of the pop cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That happens to be Taylor Swift : the Eras Tour.
Parentheses, the movie.
Parentheses, the film.
Second would be the Diamondbacks, just because they have the youngest team left in the field. They're most likely to have grown up with Taylor Swift as a larger part of their life.
Right.
I'm trying to picture Tommy Pham watching Taylor Swift: The Eras Tour in theaters and just having the worst time of his life. I don't think he would be chill about that.
I don't think so.
Third is a toss-up. I think it's probably the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel that strongly about it. I just feel like the Astros are like, we don't get to hear as much about what the Astros actually like because everybody's just mad at them all the time.
Yeah.
So we know that they are just like dominating on the baseball field. And I know that Alex Bregman would be in there for the clout. But for the rest of the team, I don't really know what their like personalities are like when it comes to pop culture. The Rangers, I mean, you have the whole Creed thing. Like they have some general awareness of like popular music, even if that popular music is music that is a meme.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like Scherzer would get really into it.
Oh, Scherzer. He's on the Rangers.
He is on the Rangers and back for this series.
Is he? Is that confirmed?
That was just confirmed.
Today?
Like right before we started recording, yeah.
Damn. That actually makes me kind of nervous. Because what if he comes in and stinks? It's like we shouldn't have changed. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, true.
Let Nate cook, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they still will let Nate cook. Like, this is a longer series, so they will need another pitcher rather than beyond just Nathan Eovaldi and Jordan Montgomery. Okay. Wyatt, thank you. Good question. Next question comes from M. O'Neill. How unpleasant is it to watch games from the Rangers Stadium on television?
Miserable.
It doesn't look good. It looks like it's being played legitimately in a warehouse. Why? This is a brand new stadium. I like it's called Globe Life Field, and it's just everybody in baseball media and on Twitter just calls it Globe Death Field.
I do think that one of the enjoyable things about baseball is that every field is a little bit different, right? And part of that means that every broadcast is going to look a little bit different. And so it's one of these weird quirks that baseball just offers, right? Because the outfield walls are slightly different distances and they curve at different scientific phrases. I feel like you can figure it out for the playoffs. Like, I feel like you can figure out a level of consistency, given that it's generally speaking the same broadcasters who are putting these things on TV. Like,
So you're saying that the TV broadcast itself looks disorienting when you watch Texas?
Isn't that what the question is? I thought, because like the literal
well, yeah, I think
angle
that
of the
is
camera
the question.
is like from really high up and directly behind the pitcher.
True.
I
took the question to be more generally as to why they built a ballpark that looks like dog shit on TV.
God, I got it.
It's like dark and like uninspiring and impersonal, and I don't know. Your point is probably more accurate.
Things to take away from this.
Your point is probably more accurate, and that this person is probably asking why they broadcast it that way. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think that for all the exposure that we've had to the Astros field, Minute Maid Park, over the last 6 years, as they've been in 6 or 7 or 30 consecutive ALCSs, I still think that I think that ballpark looks pretty good on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the Crawford boxes are kind of a sham, but like whatever, like nothing matters. Like you're all playing on the same field. So I think it looks great. I love the like brick train left field situation. I think that all of the orange really pops on a television broadcast. It's nice at least that the Astros are not red, white, and blue. Because if we had to see this team,
oh my God,
and in boring red, white, and blue uniforms over the last half decade or decade at this point.
I mean, it'd be like watching the Rangers, I think.
Oh no. Who do you think's going to win the series?
I mean, I think it's going to be the Astros, but I'm not sure that I can say that with my chest. You know, like it feels like it's going to be closer than it looks on paper. I just give the edge to the Astros because why would you not after looking at the last 5 or 6 years of baseball? But
right, because they've never given us any reason not to believe in them.
Yeah,
I know, but then just part of me is like, is there really going to be a World Series rematch?
Right.
That doesn't seem right. But oh my God, Rangers, Phillies. This is the point in the podcast at which I tell you guys about how I'm staring into the void.
Yeah.
I suppose that the ranking of teams that I want to win the World Series left now that the Phillies have done what I needed them to do, now that I can be extricated from my deep, deep undercover work within the Phillies fan base, I think that they move immediately to last.
Okay.
Despite the fact that any objective person would put them first.
Right.
They're last for me because I'm a very subjective person. I think that second to last, honestly, is the Rangers. Because I am a hater, and I think that I would not like to see former Mets get World Series rings 1 year after leaving the Mets. And I hate the energy around their organization specifically.
Yeah.
I actually really deeply admire a lot of their fans, and I think that they're pretty normal about the team. And within recent memory, they have had very likable teams. Like the team, like the 11 and 12 teams, I have a nostalgia for them because I was like a teenager, like watching Beltre and Hamilton and all of these guys, like, was sort of amazing.
Fielder, Andrus,
right? Like, yeah, exactly.
You could really name remember some guys from the Rangers mid 2000s teams.
Those teams were stacked.
Yeah. Also, the only baseball team which will show you a Lockheed Martin banner in the outfield, so you can pick your poison.
That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
And the whole like we pretend the whole like if you're not straight, you're not welcome here
Mhm.
thing is like actually legitimately like hanging over this team from a neutral observer perspective. The Astros second. The Astros are probably second because like I've dealt with it so many times over the last few years. Like, what's one more World Series? Like, we could just it doesn't change anything about how I feel to them, and doesn't change really anything about how good I think that they are or were. Like, I can live with that. That's just like another line on the Astros Wikipedia page or Baseball Reference page or whatever. And then I guess the Diamondbacks have to be the team that I want to win the most because they're the least offensive to me personally. But at the same time, I'm like pretty uninspired by the notion of the Diamondbacks winning the World Series. So feels kind of like a real crapshoot for me at this point. I think, to round all the way back to what I asked you, I think that the Astros will win this series. Mainly because I trust their first and second plan better than I trust the Rangers' second plan. Meaning, like, if everything breaks right for the Rangers, I think that they have a very, very, very good shot of winning this series and beating the Astros and knocking them off. And I think that their lineup somehow, though very comparable, is like performing better right now. But if like one or maybe two or even three things goes wrong, as they often do in a 7-game series in the championship series against the best of the best, I feel better about like the Astros backup plan, the Astros bullpen, the Astros second, third, and fourth starters, the Astros 6, 7, 8, 9 in the lineup. Like, for some reason, I feel more confident in them, even though I'm sure that like Bruce Bochy will call on some guy at the end of the bench and he'll hit a pinch hit walk-off home run to win the ALCS. But whatever, that is what it is.
I think I'm pulling for a Phillies Rangers World Series.
The Hamels Bowl.
Uh-huh. You know how much I love red, white, and blue jerseys. I feel like let's just get it all in.
The Phillies, like, their blue is like not really.
It's not really
featured.
Involved.
It's like red and white.
It's red and white. Yeah.
Clinching in the retros was kind of baller.
Such a sick move.
You don't need to go on record on who you think will win that series yet. We can wait until next episode. So Phillies Diamondbacks. What's like your one big thought about this series?
I feel a little bit like the Diamondbacks are really, this is kind of the first real challenge they're going to be facing this postseason. No disrespect to fans of a blue and white team that we've been asked not to mention.
Absolutely bodied.
Am I wrong though? Like, just in terms of vibes, momentum, whatever you want to call it, the Phillies are in a really good position right now, I think. And just as you mentioned earlier, that's a team of players who love to play together and actively have players around the league who are like, yeah, we want to come and play with y'all.
Yeah.
Because like this is a good vibe. So I think it's going to be a real test for a very young Diamondbacks team to kind of come up against a group of guys that have had some time to mesh, especially in October under some of these biggest lights. I do think it's going to be a fascinating series, but it
would be too cute to pick against the Phillies.
It would be a little too cute.
If there's going to be a team that should do the nobody believes in us,
it's the
and
D-backs.
Put Atlanta to shame, it's the D-backs. Like nobody believes in
like
them.
Actually, like it's true.
Like straight up, nobody believes that they're going to win this series. So I think it's going to be Phillies Astros rematch. I guess that's my prediction. We had a couple more questions here, but we're running pretty long here. So I think I want to wrap it there. But before I do, as we close it out here, do you want to make a prediction for the weirdest thing that you think will happen in the championship series? Corey Seager's 6-walk game breaks his record that he set, 5-walk game, most walks in a playoff game.
I don't know. I feel like there's been a staggering lack of rules discourse, and this is a feature of every playoffs. Is at least once there's at least one moment or two where a relatively unknown rule kind of gets brought into the center of the conversation. I don't know that I can make a prediction on what that rule is. I think because that's the fun of it, is that you kind of don't have that idea going forward. Yeah. But like, it's not like we're just going to get a pitch clock violation. Although, I mean,
I was just recently reminded of the infield fly debacle.
Right. Yeah.
From a few years back, because there was an infield fly in Game 4 of the Phillies Braves series that because I wasn't listening to it, I was watching it at a bar with no sound. I couldn't tell that they had called an infield fly, and I thought that they were going to let it drop, and then turned into a whole thing. Okay, so a rules debate. I think it would be funny if it was a pitch clock violation, and I think there's only one person that comes to mind that I think would make it the funniest, and that's Max Scherzer.
Yep.
So
I mean, he's the guy I was thinking of like who is going to be at the center of whatever the controversy is.
Max Scherzer sticky stuff ejection in
That's
game
kind
3.
of what I was thinking of at first.
Oh man, is Scherzer Verlander on the table like as a matchup? Could they potentially pitch against each other? Scherzer Verlander like benches clearing brawl. That's my prediction. I think that they might actually not like each other. Like I think that they might begrudgingly respect and love each other. Like you might begrudgingly respect and love like a member of your family who you don't like, or you're not like psyched to be around at like large family functions. But I think that they're like not homies.
No, I think they're again cordial off the field, but they're both such right, exactly. They're both such competitors, and obviously they have. I think I'm definitely the Scherzer
in this analogy.
I mean, any analogy in which you end up being Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander is a pretty good one.
Don't you agree though? Like, don't you think I'm a little bit more like manic and weird and intense?
Yes,
and you're a little bit more like laid back, but under the surface, like also still pretty competitive. And like opinionated and like strongly formed in your view of how things should be done.
Right, exactly. But mostly airing it out kind of like in like sort of passive aggressive.
Like I'm a chill wife guy kind of way.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm a chill co-host for life guy kind of way. Okay, well, I'm glad we clarified that, and I'm glad I asked because it got us the I'm Max Scherzer to your Justin Verlander analogy. Thank you to everybody for listening. I mean, there's a decent shot that none of this podcast made any sense because I felt like for the first about like 70 minutes, I was just kind of rambling my thoughts about the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah.
A team that I found myself really fully, wholeheartedly supporting over the last week or so. And I was just, coming into this podcast in a weird headspace for various reasons. Just a lot of reasons. Anyway, thank you to everybody for listening. We will have more information about when the watch along is happening, how you can join. We will also be back around this time next week to talk about what is most likely the World Series matchup, but potentially could still be the championship series. So we will see you then.
I've been put through the ringer, and I still flinch every time I see the words I hate Steven Singer.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!
Can you dig me? Yeah.
In terms of like memed rock from the 2000s, this is like better musically than Nickelback.
Yes.
Like a lot better.
Yeah.
I mean, his voice is obviously more absurd, but this is...
I mean, not by much.